The opulent silence of the Blackwood mansion was a presence in itself, a heavy, expensive quiet broken only by the whisper of central air and the distant, muffled ticking of a grandfather clock worth more than most families' cars. Sunlight, thick and syrupy, streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating dancing motes of dust over acres of polished marble. In the center of the vast living room, a room designed more for impression than for living, stood Sterling Blackwood. He was a man carved from ambition and cold calculation, his suit sharper than his features, his watch a sliver of platinum that glinted with a value that demanded notice. His attention was not on the view of the manicured grounds below, nor on the collection of modern art that adorned the walls. It was focused, with an intensity usually reserved for a corporate takeover, on a single object resting on a slender pedestal of black obsidian. It was a vase. But to call it merely a vase was to call the ocean merely water. It was an artifact, a whisper from a dynasty centuries dead. Its porcelain was so thin it seemed to hold the light rather than reflect it, glowing with a soft, milky luminescence. Across its surface, artisans long turned to dust had painted a delicate, intricate scene of cranes in flight over a misty mountain range, each brushstroke a testament to a forgotten patience. This was his newest acquisition, his ultimate prize, the crown jewel of a collection that had long since ceased to bring him any real joy, yet whose pursuit was the only language he understood. His daughter, Chloe, slouched on a divan of ivory silk, her phone a tiny, buzzing appendage in her hand. At 18 she had inherited her father's sharp features but had twisted them into a permanent mask of disdain. She was bored. The vase, like everything else in her life, was just another thing, another expensive placeholder for a father's attention that never came in a form she actually needed. "It's just a pot, father," she said, her voice a sigh of profound disinterest. "You spend all that money on a pot." Sterling Blackwood did not look at her. His fingers, hovering inches from the porcelain, almost trembled with a possessiveness that bordered on the religious. "It is not a pot, Chloe," he corrected, his voice low and smooth as polished stone. "It is a fragment of history. It is the last of its kind. The emperor who commissioned it watched his own son be executed for touching it with unclean hands. Its value is not in the money, which was considerable, but in its perfection. It is flawless." He finally turned his gaze upon her, and it was as cold as the marble floor. "It is the only flawless thing in this house." The barb, as always, was precise and meant to wound. Chloe's jaw tightened. She pushed herself off the divan, a storm of petty rebellion brewing in her eyes. "Well, let's see how flawless it is on camera," she muttered, striding toward the pedestal. She wanted to post it, to own his precious thing in the only way she knew how, through the filtered lens of social media, to harvest the envy of her peers. She elbowed past him, her focus on the screen of her phone, not on the delicate table beside the pedestal that held a single crystal ashtray. Her hip connected with the table's edge. The movement was small, a mere bump. The table shuddered. The crystal ashtray shivered, danced on its edge for a heart-stopping second, and then fell to the floor with a crash that sounded like a gunshot in the silent room. But that was not the sound that froze the blood in Sterling Blackwood's veins. The vibration traveled from the table to the pedestal. The vase, for a moment, seemed to defy physics. It stood, perfectly balanced, a monument to its own fragility. And then, with a graceful, almost slow-motion tilt, it plunged from its stand and met the hard, unyielding marble. The sound was not a single crash, but a symphony of destruction. 1,000 porcelain pieces, 1,000 fragments of flawless history, skittered and spun across the floor, catching the sunlight in a cruel, glittering mockery of their former unity. Time stopped. Chloe stood, her phone still held up, her face a mask of pure, unadulterated terror. Her father was a statue, his back to her, his shoulders rigid. The silence that followed was louder than the crash, a vacuum of sound that sucked all the air from the room. Chloe's mind raced, a frantic animal in a trap. His wrath was a tangible thing, a storm she had spent her life avoiding. She could not bear it. She would not. It was in this petrified silence that the door to the living room swung open. Elena, the maid, entered carrying a feather duster, her footsteps silent on the thick rug. Her eyes, wide and earnest, took in the scene, the master, frozen, the mistress, pale as death, and the glittering sea of broken porcelain that had once been the center of the universe. Her mouth opened in a small, shocked O of concern. It was all the opportunity Chloe needed. The finger that shot out was accusatory and sharp, a weapon in itself. "You." Chloe's voice was a shrill shriek, laced with a desperation that gave it a terrifying force. "You clumsy, stupid girl. Look what you've done." You've broken it. You've broken my father's vase. Elena flinched as if struck. The color drained from her face. And me? Miss Chloe, no, I just walked in. Don't you lie to me. Chloe screamed, advancing on her, the performance of her life fueled by sheer panic. I saw you. You were dusting too close. You always rush, you careless thing. You bumped it. You've ruined everything. Sterling Blackwood turned. The movement was slow, deliberate. The cold in his eyes had been replaced by a fire so hot it was glacial. His gaze swept from his daughter's convincingly outraged face to the cowering form of the maid. He saw the evidence before him, the broken treasure, his distraught daughter, and the guilty, trembling servant. The narrative was perfect. It was simple. It required no complex thought about his own child's carelessness. It fit the world as he understood it. His things were precious, and those beneath him were there to be blamed. His voice, when it came, was quiet. It was the quiet of absolute, unquestionable authority. It was more frightening than any shout. Is this true? He asked Elena. Sir, I promise you I was not even in the room, Elena pleaded, her voice a desperate whisper. I heard the crash and I came to see. Be silent, he hissed. The words cut through her plea like a blade. He walked toward her, each step a measured, threatening beat on the marble. He looked down at her not as a person but as a problem. An inconvenient, breakable object that had dared to damage his most prized possession. You were hired for a simple task, he said, his voice dripping with a contempt so profound it seemed to stain the air. To clean. To be invisible. To care for the things that are so far beyond your value it is laughable. And you could not even manage that. He gestured to the glittering fragments on the floor. This was flawless. It was perfect. And you, with your clumsy, worthless hands, have reduced it to rubbish. Just like you. Elena's eyes welled with tears, but she refused to let them fall. She stood her ground, a tiny island of dignity in the face of his tsunami of scorn. Pick it up, he commanded. Sir? Get on your knees, he said, the command absolute. And you will pick up every single piece. Every last sliver. You will not use a brush. You will not use a dustpan. You will use the hands that were so careless. You will feel the consequences of your incompetence. You will gather every fragment and you will do it now. Humiliated, her heart shattered into more pieces than the vase, Elena slowly sank to her knees. The cold marble seeped through her thin uniform. She reached out a trembling hand and began to pluck the sharp, painful shards from the floor, each one a physical manifestation of the injustice. Chloe watched, her initial relief now curdled with a sickening guilt she quickly buried under a facade of smug vindication. Sterling Blackwood watched, his arms crossed, a satisfied grimace on his face, believing order was being restored. He saw a servant being punished for a mistake. He saw his authority asserted. He saw a valuable lesson being taught. He saw everything in that moment and understood nothing at all. The truth was lying in pieces at his feet, but he was too arrogant to ever think of looking down. A week had passed within the cavernous silence of the Blackwood mansion, a week that felt less like 7 days and more like a single, prolonged moment of suspended anger. The air itself remained thick and heavy, unwilling to circulate, as if stifled by the lingering ghost of the shattered vase. Sterling Blackwood moved through the rooms of his home like a caged predator, his usual cold demeanor now sharpened to a razor's edge of perpetual irritation. The new maid, a woman named Anya with frightened eyes and hands that shook when she polished silver, tiptoed through her duties, a living embodiment of the fear that now permeated the household. She had been hired with a terse warning about precision and the dire consequences of carelessness, a story she'd already been told by the tight-lipped butler. She was a ghost in a house of ghosts, replacing one who had been vanished for the crime of breaking the unbreakable. Chloe, for her part, had retreated into a sullen, defensive shell. The initial thrill of her successful deception had curdled almost instantly into a low, humming anxiety that followed her from room to room. She was jumpy, snapping at Anya over imagined slights, her guilt manifesting as a heightened, performative cruelty. She avoided the living room entirely, the site of the crime, and when forced to pass its open doors, she would quicken her pace, her eyes fixed straight ahead, refusing to glance at the empty obsidian pedestal that stood as a monument to her lie. She saw the constant thundercloud on her father's face and knew it was her doing, but the path of confession seemed impossibly steep and fraught with a wrath she had only narrowly avoided. So she buried the truth deeper, masking it with louder music, more extravagant online shopping, and a bitterness that grew like a weed. It was on the 8th morning, a Tuesday of stark, bright sunshine that felt like an insult to the mansion's gloom, that the doorbell rang. Its chime, usually a soft, melodic tone, seemed to echo through the halls with an unusual, assertive clarity. Anya, nearest to the front entryway, hesitated, wiping her hands on her apron before moving to answer it. Through the intricate stained glass of the grand doors, she saw the blurred silhouette of a man, slight of build and patiently waiting. She opened the door a cautious fraction. The man standing on the immaculate doorstep was old, his posture slightly stooped, dressed in a simple, well-worn coat that spoke of comfort, not wealth. His face was a roadmap of gentle wrinkles, and his eyes held a calm, observing stillness that was utterly alien to the frantic energy of the house. In his hands he held a simple cardboard box, carefully sealed with plain brown tape. "I am here to see Mr. Sterling Blackwood," the man said. His voice was quiet, yet it carried a peculiar depth and resonance, a voice used to being listened to. Anya, flustered, began the well-rehearsed denial. "I'm sorry, sir, Mr. Blackwood does not see visitors without a pre-scheduled." "Please," the old man interrupted, not unkindly. "Tell him my name is Mr. Chen. And tell him I am here regarding the vase." The word vase acted like a magic spell. Anya's eyes widened. She nodded mutely, retreating into the hall and closing the door softly on the visitor, leaving him standing in the morning sun. She found Mr. Blackwood in his study, staring at a financial report without seeing it. At the message his head snapped up. His eyes, cold and suspicious, narrowed. "Chin?" he muttered to himself. The name was not in his ledger of important contacts. Regarding the vase? A flicker of something, not hope, but a voracious need for resolution, for someone to finally validate his loss, crossed his face. Send him in. Mr. Chin was shown into the study, a room of dark wood and leather, a shrine to money and power. He did not seem intimidated by the grandeur. He placed the cardboard box carefully on the edge of the vast empty desk and stood waiting, his hands clasped gently in front of him. "Well?" Blackwood demanded, not offering a seat. "What is this about? If you are another appraiser hoping to gawk at the sight of a tragedy, you are wasting your time." "I am not here to gawk, Mr. Blackwood," Mr. Chin said, his voice still calm. "I am here to return something that belongs to you." He began to carefully unseal the box. Blackwood's breath caught. A wild, impossible thought seized him. Had it been insured? Was this some miraculous recovery? He watched, mesmerized, as Mr. Chin parted the packing paper within the box. And there it was. The vase. It sat whole, pristine, the cranes in eternal flight over their misty mountains. It was perfect. It was flawless. A slow, triumphant smile began to spread across Sterling Blackwood's face. The world made sense again. His treasure was restored. His order was re-established. "How?" he began, his voice thick with greedy relief. "The craftsmanship, it's impeccable. You've done the impossible. Name your price. Whatever it is yours." Mr. Chin did not smile. He looked at Blackwood with an expression of profound, almost sorrowful patience. "There is no price, Mr. Blackwood. The restoration was not done for you." He paused, letting the strange words hang in the air. "It was done for my granddaughter. She brought the pieces to me. Every last one. She gathered them with her own hands as she was commanded to do." The triumph on Blackwood's face froze, then slowly began to crack. "Your granddaughter?" "Elena," Mr. Chin said softly. The name landed in the room with the weight of a tombstone. The air grew cold. Blackwood's mind, so adept at navigating complex corporate mergers, struggled to process this simple, devastating connection. The maid. The old man. The restoration. The pieces began to shift, but the picture they were forming was one he desperately did not want to see. "She was very distressed," Mr. Chin continued, his gaze unwavering. "Not just from the humiliation, though that was deep and cruel, but from the injustice. She told me a story, Mr. Blackwood. A story of a crash, an accusation, and a lie." He reached into the inner pocket of his coat and produced a small, ordinary USB drive. "She is an honest girl. She insisted on the truth. And it seems the truth was watching even when no one else was." He placed the drive on the desk next to the vase. "There is a clock in your living room. An antique ormolu piece on the mantel. A beautiful object. My granddaughter, in her diligence, would wind it and dust it every Tuesday. It was one of her tasks. What you did not know, what perhaps the person who sold it to you did not think to mention, is that a previous owner, a man paranoid about his staff, had a miniature security camera installed within the scrollwork of the base. A tiny hidden eye. It is motion activated. It records to a local drive inside the clock's mechanism. Elena, in her thoroughness, knew of it. She found the drive inside the clock after she was dismissed. She brought it to me. Blackwood felt the floor sway beneath him. He said nothing. He could say nothing. His eyes were locked on the innocuous little piece of plastic on his desk. I took the liberty of reviewing the footage, Mr. Chin said, his tone never accusatory, only factual. It is all there, Mr. Blackwood. The entire event. The conversation. The bump. The fall. The lie. The command. It is a very clear recording. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the sound of a billionaire's worldview, meticulously constructed over a lifetime, collapsing into dust. He saw it all now, not through the arrogant filter of his own assumptions, but with the horrifying crystal clarity of truth. He saw his daughter's careless hip bump the table. He saw the genuine shock on her face. He saw the calculating, desperate shift as Elena entered the room. He saw his own face, twisted with a rage that was not just about a broken object, but about the violation of his perfect, controlled world. He saw himself, a tyrant presiding over a terrible wrong. Mr. Chin watched the understanding break over the man like a wave. He gave him a moment, a small mercy before he spoke again. He gestured to the vase now standing whole between them. There is one more truth, Mr. Blackwood. While the restoration was a labor of respect for the art form, it was also necessary to prove a final point. You spoke of flawlessness, of perfection. You valued this object above a human being for its history and its rarity. He leaned forward slightly, his old eyes holding the shattered man's gaze. The original vase you purchased, the one that broke, was a fake. A very, very clever one, but a fake nonetheless. The pigments, the weight of the clay, the specific technique of the firing, it was a modern reproduction, designed to deceive the arrogant and the wealthy who see only a price tag and a story. The only thing of true value in this room now is the craftsmanship it took to put the pieces back together. A lesson, perhaps, in what we choose to value. Sterling Blackwood stood motionless. The two truths, the lie of his daughter and the lie of his treasure, intertwined and struck him with a force more physical than any blow. He had been wrong. Not just mistaken, but profoundly, grotesquely wrong. He had valued a fake, he had believed a liar, and he had destroyed something truly genuine, a person's dignity, for the sake of her illusion. He was not the powerful titan of industry in that moment. He was a small, foolish man standing in a room full of lies, his own reflection staring back at him from the gleaming, flawless surface of a beautifully restored fake. And he was utterly, completely speechless. The journey was not taken in the usual Blackwood limousine. Sterling Blackwood, moving with a strange, deliberate purpose, had instructed his driver to take the town car, a vehicle less conspicuous than the armored behemoth he usually preferred. Chloe sat beside him in the plush back seat, but the space between them was a vast, silent chasm. She stared out the window, watching the pristine, manicured lawns of their neighborhood give way to the more modest, lived-in streets of the city's outskirts. Her hands were clasped tightly in her lap, her knuckles white. The furious, defensive mask she had worn for a week had finally crumbled in her father's study, leaving behind only a pale, frightened girl burdened by a guilt so heavy it seemed to physically press her down into the leather seat. She had cried then. Great, heaving sobs of confession that were met not with the expected explosion of wrath, but with her father's terrifying, silent stillness. Now the silence continued, a shared sentence they were both serving. Sterling Blackwood did not look at his daughter. His gaze was also fixed on the world passing by, but he did not see the houses or the trees. He saw, replaying on a relentless loop, the grainy, silent footage from the clock. He saw his own face, contorted in unjust rage. He saw Elena's, a portrait of stunned, helpless shock. He saw the moment of the crash, the true one, and the lie that followed. He saw it 100 times, 1,000 times, and with each viewing, the foundations of his own self-regard cracked a little more. Mr. Chen's final words echoed in his mind, a death knell for his arrogance. The only thing of true value in this room now is the craftsmanship it took to put the pieces back together. He was driving toward that craftsmanship now, both in the object and in the person. The car slowed and came to a stop before a small, unassuming storefront nestled between a bakery and a hardware store. The sign above the door was simple, hand-painted, Chen's Restorations. The window was clean, displaying a few beautifully mended pieces of pottery and a carefully reassembled antique wooden toy. It was a place of quiet skill, not loud wealth. For a long moment, neither Blackwood nor Chloe moved. The divide between the opulent world they had just left and this humble one felt immense, a gap they had to cross not in a car but in their souls. He opened his own door, the action feeling strangely manual, grounding. He did not wait for Chloe. She followed, a hesitant shadow. The bell on the shop door chimed softly, a gentle sound compared to the grand peal of their own mansion's bell. The air inside was warm and carried the faint, clean smells of glue, wood shavings and tea. And there, at a wide workbench bathed in the light from a large window, was Elena. She was not in a maid's uniform. She wore simple, comfortable clothes. She was concentrating, her brow furrowed as she used a delicate brush to apply a minute amount of adhesive to the hairline fracture of a small ceramic bird. She looked up at the sound of the bell, and the sight of the blackwood standing in her grandfather's shop froze her. The brush hovered in midair. The quiet concentration on her face melted away, replaced by caution and a deep, well-earned wariness. It was Chloe who broke the standstill. The sight of Elena, whole and capable and in her own element, was the final push she needed. The words burst from her, rushed and choked with emotion, shattering the quiet of the workshop. "Elena, I'm so sorry," she blurted out, her voice trembling violently. "It was me. I did it. I was the one who broke the vase. I was scared and I panicked and I lied. I said it was you and it was the most horrible, cowardly thing I've ever done. I felt sick about it every single second since. You didn't deserve that. You never did. I'm so ashamed." Tears, real and unforced, streamed down her face now, washing away the last remnants of her haughty facade. She stood there, exposed and vulnerable, awaiting a judgment that was not hers to give. The silence returned, thicker now. Elena slowly placed the brush down. She looked from Chloe's ravaged, sincere face to the stoic, imposing figure of Sterling Blackwood. She took a slow breath, absorbing the apology, measuring its weight. Then her gaze settled on him. It was his turn. Sterling Blackwood found that his voice, usually a tool of command and dismissal, felt rough and unfamiliar in his throat. He had rehearsed nothing. For the first time in his adult life, he was speaking without a script, without a strategy, led only by a raw and painful need for atonement. "Chloe's words are true," he began, his voice low and gravelly. "But the greater fault is mine." He took a step forward, not to intimidate, but to close the distance his actions had created. "I did not listen. I did not question. I saw only what I expected to see. I valued an object, a possession that it turns out was never even genuine, above your character. I used my power to humiliate you, to make you feel small and worthless, because it was easier than facing a more complicated truth about my own home and my own child." He paused, the admission costing him dearly. "I was not just wrong, Elena. I was cruel. And there is no excuse for it. Your dignity, your honesty, your years of faithful work, they were all infinitely more valuable than that vase could ever have been. I see that now. I am deeply and truly sorry." He did not offer her job back. Not yet. That would have been another transaction, another imposition of his will. This was not about what he could give her, it was about what he had taken. "My home is yours if you wish to return," he said, the offer hanging in the air, devoid of demand. "With a new position, respect, and a salary that reflects the profound error of my judgment. But that is for you to decide. We are here only to apologize. To acknowledge the wrong we did to you." Elena listened to every word. She saw the shame on Chloe's face, the raw, unvarnished humility on Sterling Blackwood's. She saw the mighty brought low not by financial ruin, but by the simple, crushing weight of truth. She saw the broken pieces of their arrogance, and she felt no desire to make them pick them up with their bare hands. She had inherited her grandfather's wisdom, his understanding that some things once broken could be made whole again, but they were never quite the same. They were stronger at the mended places. "Thank you," she said, her voice clear and calm. "Thank you for telling me the truth." She looked at Chloe. "I forgive you, Chloe." She then turned her gaze to Mr. Blackwood. "And I forgive you, sir." The grace in her words was a force more powerful than any of his wealth. "But I will not be coming back to work for you." The statement was delivered not with bitterness, but with a gentle, unshakable finality. "What you showed me that day was that I was an appliance to you. Something to be used and blamed when something went wrong. Working here with my grandfather, I am not an appliance. I am a student. I am learning to create, to restore, to build. I am valued. I think I need to be in a place where I am valued from the beginning, not just after a mistake is uncovered." She offered a small, sad smile. "The vase is whole again. But some breaks teach us that we need to be in a different place." There was no anger in her refusal, only a quiet, formidable strength that left Sterling Blackwood humbled all over again. She was not rejecting his money, she was rejecting his worldview. She was choosing her own value. He nodded slowly, the lesson settling into his bones more deeply than any business deal ever had. "I understand," he said, and for the first time he truly did. They left the shop as they had entered, in silence, but the chasm between them had been bridged by a shared, life-altering shame. The drive home was a meditation. The next day, Sterling Blackwood personally packaged the exquisitely restored, utterly fake vase. He did not sell it. He donated it to the local high school's art department. The attached note read, "A lesson in perception, value, and the beauty of second chances." He became, in the weeks that followed, a quieter man. Less cold. He began to actually see the people who worked for him, learning their names, acknowledging their efforts. Chloe, stripped of her defensive cruelty, began the slow, difficult work of building a character that was not based on spite and privilege. The mansion was never quite so silent again. It was filled with the quieter, more comfortable sounds of a family learning, painfully, how to be human. The story of the broken vase was over. But the lesson it taught, about the true cost of arrogance and the real meaning of value, was one that would echo far beyond the walls of any mansion. It is a lesson that reminds us to look beyond the surface, to question the easy story, and to always remember that the people we might be quick to overlook often hold the greatest wisdom. They are the ones who can teach us how to put the pieces of ourselves back together. If you found this story of humility and redemption meaningful, if it reminded you that true strength lies in the courage to admit fault and the grace to forgive, then consider subscribing for more tales that explore the profound lessons hidden in everyday life. Your support helps us continue to share stories that don't just entertain but truly matter.